Thank you, Mr. Acting President. I was momentarily speechless, but I have regained my voice. You'll be pleased to know.
Order.
Before I address the substance of the motion,
The Honourable Mr. Simms has the call.
Do wish to move an amendment. The amendment standing in my name. That is, after paragraph 2, insert a new paragraph as follows. A new paragraph 3 calls on the Malinauskas government to establish a commission of inquiry to examine reviving ETSA and returning South Australia's electricity distribution and transmission network to public ownership.
Seconded. Please proceed, Mr. Simms.
Thank you, Mr. President, Acting President. I might use this opportunity as well just to indicate that the Greens will not be supporting the amendments advanced by the Honourable Ben Hood on behalf of the Honourable Heidi Girolamo. In doing so, I do make it clear, though, I do have some sympathy for the critique that the Liberals have made of Labor's inconsistency on the issue of privatisation, and were there to be a separate standalone motion dealing with the Labor Party's history of privatisation, that's something I would be open to considering. But this is an opportunity to highlight what was in effect the original sin in South Australia's energy policy, the decision that has bedevilled generations of South Australians, that is the Liberals' decision to sell off ETSA, to sell off our electricity systems here in South Australia and to sell out the people of South Australia and lock generations of South Australians into higher prices and unreliable power. That is a key event that should be condemned by this council. But also the Greens want to go further, and our amendment actually calls on the Malinauskas government to establish a commission of inquiry to look at what mechanisms there are that are available for us to take back ownership of our electricity distribution network here in South Australia. But to speak to the substance of the Honourable Reggie Martin's motion, the motion acknowledges the decision to privatise ETSA has not delivered favourable outcomes for the South Australian community. Well, with respect, Mr. Acting President, that proposition should be a no-brainer for this chamber. I have not heard the Liberals in their contribution advance one positive outcome that has been delivered by the privatisation of ETSA. Not one. And in fact, all of the evidence demonstrates that that has produced bad outcomes for the people of South Australia. So they talk about blackouts, but I mean, they've been locked in a state of perpetual blackout for the last 25 years. It's as if the last 25 years didn't happen, and they've got this collective sense of amnesia, and they pretend that they didn't sell off our electricity network, and they weren't the authors of the crisis that our state faces in terms of energy. But it's not just the Greens that are saying that privatisation has been bad news for South Australia. Indeed, 40% of South Australians, according to the Australia Institute back in 2019, blamed privatisation of ETSA for high power prices. And 3 out of 5 people, 60% of South Australians, considered the privatisation to be one of the main sources of upward pressures on prices. They believe it, and they believe it to be the case, Mr. Acting President, because it is true. I was a chair of a parliamentary inquiry into privatisation when I started in this chamber, and we received a submission from SACOS which talked about the impact of privatisation of South Australia's electricity network on increasing inequality. And I will just draw from some elements of the media release that SACOS issued in relation to that submission. And I'll quote from the release directly. This new analysis draws on the internationally famous work of economist Thomas Piketty on the drivers of inequality, said SACOS CEO Ross Womersley. While the data is not perfect, it is very clear that the privatisation of the electricity network in SA has contributed to increased inequality. And while it is concerning that the privatisation of the South Australian electricity network looks to have increased inequality, it is even more alarming that the energy regulator is setting rates of return on capital at levels which continue to increase inequality for years and years to come. The SACOS submission put 3 propositions to the multi-party committee. The rate of return to the owners of the network is greater than the growth of rate of the economy, which, as per the analysis of economist Thomas Piketty, leads to increases in inequality. This is the case based on both the regulated rate of return and the final return to shareholders. And because of the regressive consumer expenditure patterns, in theory, new capital investments, and in practice, schemes like the Residential Energy Productivity Scheme are more equitably funded from the tax base rather than by the electricity companies, where costs are being passed on to consumers. So SACOS, through their research, drawing on the views of a leading economist, concluded that privatisation was one of the key factors that was driving inequality. And indeed, over the last 25 years since the privatisation of ETSA, we've seen power prices go up here in South Australia by more than 200%. That's astronomical, Mr. President. That's a fact. Now, there's an opportunity here for the Liberal Party to make amends with the people of South Australia, for them to say we made a mistake and to learn from those mistakes. But no. Instead, what we've seen from the Liberals is brain flatulence over in Canberra, a bizarre, ill-conceived proposal from the leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton, to create a nuclear reactor here in South Australia, to set up a nuclear reactor and to put that impost on the people of Port Augusta, with no plan for what's to happen with the nuclear waste. We know whenever the Liberals talk about nuclear, they're happy to dump the waste on remote communities. That's always been their approach. Where else is it going to go? They don't want it to be in the city. They're happy to dump it in the regions. What's the cost? This proposal hasn't been costed by the Liberal opposition, but we know, based on the experience in other jurisdictions that have gone nuclear, other places around the world, that the cost will blow out by billions and billions of dollars, and that it will be impossible for us to address our energy needs within the time frame that Peter Dutton, the Honourable Peter Dutton, and the Liberals have identified, because we know that nuclear technology takes a very long time to establish and get off the ground, and it's hugely costly. This is a burden that the Liberals are proposing should be carried by the taxpayer. Why on earth would we go down that route when we could instead beef up renewables here in South Australia, beef up battery storage, and ensure that we can provide publicly owned renewable electricity to the people of our state? Why would we go down the Liberals' radioactive path? It does not make sense. The other thing that I find really baffling about this latest brain flatulence from the Liberal Party is the fact that they, Mr. President, are reviving this idea of a royal commission into the nuclear industry. Well, Mr. President, we had a royal commission. Why are they flogging that dead horse? We had a royal commission, and the commission found that this was not economically viable for South Australia. Instead of coming up with any new ideas, the Liberals just pull out that frozen pizza, get it out of the freezer, heat it up again, and serve that stale offering up to the people of South Australia. Surely they can do better than that. I urge them to repent, Mr. President. I urge them to repent and to support this motion that has been put forward by the Honourable Mr. Martin. I see you waving me. I've listened to some of my colleagues speak for 2 hours tonight. This is my first contribution of the evening. So I'm being short, but it's an important point to make with respect, Mr. President. But I urge members of Parliament to... Thank you. I urge my colleagues to support this, but also to support the Greens motion that actually adds, the Greens amendment that actually adds some verbs into the Labor Party motion and compels them to do something to ensure that we can take ownership of our electricity providers here in South Australia. The final point I will make before wrapping up is I do commend the Malinauskas government for supporting a bill that I initiated on behalf of the Greens to prevent the privatisation of public assets in the future without consideration of a parliamentary inquiry and without approval of both Houses of Parliament. This is a really important safeguard, and it will ensure that we never repeat these mistakes again. But today is a time to condemn the Liberals for selling off and selling out our state.
Here.